What is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video, and today I want to talk to you guys about why being a game collector may not be that great. Now, don't get me wrong, I truly love game collecting. It is a hobby that I am truly passionate about. And if I didn't like game collecting, I certainly would not be standing in a room just like this and of course having a YouTube channel completely dedicated to my game room and game collecting. However, when it comes to the hobby itself, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and for some people, it may not be that great. So of course in this video, I'm going to share some of my personal reasons as to why somebody may not view the hobby as that great. And of course, I'm not going to rank these statements in any way, shape, or form of which one's the most impactful to the least impactful or whatever like that. I'm just going to throw them right into this video so you guys can just see the matter at hand and of course just see what's going on. So without further ado, let's dive right into this video subject and take a look at why being a game collector may not be that great right after the intro. Alright, so I'm going to start this video off pretty strong with this statement right here about why being a game collector may not be that great, and that is the fact that your collection might be a massive burden. So what do I mean by this? Now, of course, if your collection is smaller, it may not be that big of a deal. But of course, when your collection grows bigger and bigger and bigger, that's when we can talk about your collection potentially being a burden. So what do I mean by this? Now, as you can imagine, over the years, I've done a lot of work to make sure that my collection is in tip-top shape, everything's in good condition, all that wonderful stuff. Of course, whenever I buy games and consoles, either locally or online or whatever, right, I try to make sure that everything's in good shape. May not be like the best shape ever, but I want to be able to have my games wherever like I take a game off of a shelf and show it to somebody. Somebody's not going to think that game is a massive eyesore when they look at the condition of that game. Now, of course, if you really want to make sure that your stuff is well taken care of and all that, obviously you're going to take extra steps to make sure that your games are in tip-top shape, along with your consoles as well. Now, of course, there are some games that, sometimes that might need a little bit of maintenance. And what do I mean by this? Take for example, like a Super Nintendo game, right? There are little batteries inside of them, and of course Super Nintendo's getting pretty up there when it comes to the age of just the brand, the games, the consoles, all that wonderful stuff. And of course these batteries are going to die out. Not a matter of if, but a matter of when. So of course you are probably going to have to think about the fact that, one day you might have to learn some soldering skills, get the batteries replaced, or pay somebody to do battery replacement for you. It's a real issue to think about right here. Now, of course, I'm not saying that to scare anybody from collecting Super Nintendo games or cart-based games, but that is the reality to face when it comes to that. Of course, when it comes to your collection, life happens. Like, you may have to move one day, whether you get like a job opportunity or say like you've got like a sick family member and you got to live closer to them. Maybe you lose a job and you have to sell your house and you have to downsize and you go live in an apartment or whatever. These things happen. So of course, if you are going to be moving and you've got a big collection, that is going to be a huge deal. So I will say one thing, while I certainly do enjoy the hobby and I don't mind doing the extra work myself when it comes to making sure everything is in tip-top shape, but if for whatever reason you are looking at some videos online, you see people with some really big game collections, and you kind of want to jump into the hobby, you might want to be careful what you sign up for and really consider about like, hey, this may not be an easy thing to do. Now, of course, this is another big one worth talking about, and that is the fact that this hobby can be very expensive. For example, take a look at these Sega Saturn games right behind me. The Sega Saturn is easily one of my favorite game consoles of all time, and it is one of my goals to get a complete North American Sega Saturn set. However, I'm doing it very, very, very slowly. If you want to take a look at some of the prices for Sega Saturn games, just go on eBay, Mercari, all those sites, whatever, right? And you're going to see very quickly that that's not a cheap console to collect for. And of course, Sega Saturn isn't the only console that's expensive to collect for. Of course, I'm talking about other consoles such as GameCube. A lot of collectors love GameCube, and for good reason too. Lots of great games, fantastic library. So I will say, when it comes to collecting games, the fact that it can be an expensive hobby is definitely a big turnoff for some. Now, of course, there are consoles that are cheap to collect for, such as original Xbox, PlayStation 2, Xbox 360. Right now, of course, a lot of collectors mostly gravitate towards PlayStation than compared to Xbox. But I will say that if you are talking about some things that may not be so great about game collecting, of course, looking at the price tag of some of these games lately, I mean, that can be a definite turnoff for some. Of course, this is another one that I have to bring up right here in this video, and that is the fact that your stuff doesn't last forever. Of course, what do I mean by this? Let's face it, consoles break down, games get scratched up, there's disc rot, and a whole other just list of things to talk about. I'm sure some of you may be wondering what exactly disc rot is, and essentially, like the name suggests, it's when your disc begins to rot away, either because of poor manufacturing for the disc, poor care for the disc, it could be in a very humid environment. There's a lot of factors that play into disc rot when it comes to not only games, but like CDs, movies, the like, all that jazz, right? I won't go into a lot of descriptive detail about it because I got another video right here that I've already done where I talk about the subject of disc rot more in depth. But of course, I'll give a great example of like things that may not last forever and things that don't last forever. Last year, I tried to turn on my PS2 fat model, and it like a week later, it didn't turn on. Like, I played it like a week before, just fine, and then 1 week later, it won't turn on. Now, thankfully, I did find out that there is a part inside that unfortunately will die after 20 some years or whatever, no matter how well you take care of the console. Now, thankfully, that part was very easy to replace and it was not expensive at all. And it was a pretty straightforward fix. But of course, sometimes there are consoles where replacement parts are not going to be as easily accessible, especially with some of the more niche consoles, such as the 3DO, right? Getting replacement parts for a PS2 is going to be much easier than with the 3DO. And, that's just one thing to consider too when it comes to you being a game collector. Your stuff is not going to last forever. And if you're somebody that wants to keep everything forever, there's a ton of things that you can do to make sure that your stuff will last as long as it can. Of course, there's still a good amount of things that will last, perhaps past your lifetime, as well as depending on how well you take care of your stuff. Of course, I'm not saying this to scare anybody away. We all got to have a hobby that makes us happy, and don't let something stupid prevent you from enjoying something that you love. But of course, it is important to talk about the cons from time to time. Now, thankfully, this isn't that big of a deal, but of course, it is a con worth talking about. And that is the fact that it's pretty easy to end up with duplicates with games. Of course, that's mostly if you have a really large game collection, such as me. But if you're somebody that kind of just wants to keep the essentials that you enjoy, and you don't really plan to get that many games, that's probably a problem that you're not going to have to worry about too much. Now, of course, there are plenty of ways to track what games you have in your collection, different apps. I personally use Notes on my iPhone. Of course, there's all kinds of different ways to do it, but of course, we're humans. We make mistakes. We forget to plug stuff in, right? It's gonna happen. I've had plenty of times where, thankfully, not too much, but still a considerable amount, where I forgot to type in to my notes like, hey, I've got this game on PlayStation 2, right? And I go to the thrift store and I'm like, oh, cool, I don't have this game in my collection. So then I bring it home and then I take a look at my shelf and then I realize I've got a duplicate. It's gonna happen. Of course, not a major problem, you know, it's just kind of part of the hobby or whatever. Yeah, like I said, not really major, but it is something that you will face eventually, depending on how big your collection gets. And of course, you know, when you got to track your games. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out my video. Please be sure to check out these videos here, here, and here. After all, I post a lot of content when it comes to game collecting tips, and other video game related subjects. So be sure to keep an eye out every Monday and Friday where I upload consistently, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.